Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakah Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Song of Songs, the 8th chapter. Oh, that thou wert as my brother, that sucked the breast of my mother. When I should find thee without, I will kiss thee. Yea, I should not be despised. Now, in this chapter, right, and also in the other chapters as well, as you read it, if you read from the first chapter all the way to the 8th chapter, and you sort of follow the storyline, of the this love story that Solomon wrote, even though we understand it's allegorical of him, right, and basically him speaking of the Most High. It's also allegorical of other aspects of the truth, right, that you can tie to. But looking at it first in the context of the actual story before we look at it in the allegorical form, the in context here, what the woman is saying, and when she says that, oh, that thou were as my brother, she's basically saying like she wishes she could show public affection, all right, to her lover, right? Like how siblings could show that without being criticized. Because remember, in the ancient world, that wasn't something like today. You might step outside and get on a train and you just see people tonguing each other down in public and those kinds of things. That was frowned upon. That wasn't something that was it was something that you'd be looked at as, you'd be criticized for in the ancient world. Like if you go into like a community that's like today, for example, predominantly Muslim, and you and you have a chick, like even if you just have like a chick, like a Muslim chick or a chick from their community that's walking with a guy that is not her husband and is not her relative, everybody that's around there is looking at her like, whoa, what's going on? Like, yo, what? Like, what? Yo, who is this? So there's certain, let alone, showing public display of affection, right? PDA. So here, in the context of the love story, she's saying here, I wish you were like my brother, right? That sucked the breast of my mother, my sibling, when I should find thee without. So if I was to meet you outside, I would kiss thee. Yea, I should not be despised. So I could kiss you without having to be criticized for it, right? Like, for example, if if a relative kissed another relative, I'm not talking about on the mouth here, like a kiss on the cheek or something along those lines. It's like, oh yeah, that's cool, right? That's maybe he's greeting her, or that's his sister, or that's his brother, or whatever the case is. And so that's basically what in the context what the woman is meaning by this, right? Not like trying to promote incest or anything, but just saying that, I just wish that I didn't have to worry about, being held back, in public with my lover. Now, when you look first, let's look up the word allegory. Allegory. Or allegorical. There you go. So allegorical refers to a work of art, literature, or rhetoric that uses symbolic characters, figures, and actions to represent abstract concepts, moral principles, or political truths. See, so you're using a story, but there is a reference, or that story has a meaning, okay, which can be derived from the events that take place in that story. Right, so it says here, originating from the Greek allegoria, speaking about something else. These narratives operate on two planes: the literal story and the hidden deeper meaning. So you'll notice there are a lot of allegories in the scriptures, and it's an allegory because the allegorical part about Song of Songs, the 8th chapter, is hidden. Not a lot of people know it in the terms of, like, if you read commentaries, or you ask a average so-called Christian, they wouldn't be able to relate this to the knowledge or to the truth, or to the deeper or hidden meaning of it. That's a part of why it's an allegory, right? So now, dealing with the allegorical aspect of verse 1, when it says, oh, that thou wert as my brother. That brother would be one that is like a fellow believer, right? One that is also, doing the work as you, or believes, the same as you. And Yahweh Shai confirmed that, right? Let's go to the book of Matthew, chapter 12, verse 46. It says here, while he yet talked, this is dealing with Yahweh Shai. While he yet talked to the people, behold, his mother and his brethren stood without, desiring to speak with him. This was his biological mother and his biological brothers, or relatives, that wanted to talk to him. Then one said unto him, behold, thy mother and thy brethren stand without, desiring to speak with thee. But he answered and said unto him that told him, who is my mother and who are my brethren? And he stretched forth his hand toward his disciples, and said, behold my mother and my brethren. For whosoever shall do the will of my Father which is in heaven, the same is my brother and sister and mother. So here Yahweh Shai showed you in here who is considered your brother, right? Or mother or sister or brethren. So, oh, that thou wert, if only you were as my brother, if only you were a believer like me, that sucked the breast of my mother. Because dealing, carnally, right, on a carnal level, your brother would be likened unto one that sucked the breast of your mother, because you would have the same mother, right? So just as you were breastfed, she was, ideally, right, he would be breastfed of the same mother. It's just saying you would have the same parents. Now, spiritually, right, having being brothers or brethren spiritually and sucking the breast of the same mother, the mother here or the breasts that are being sucked is in reference to the truth, right, or wisdom, okay, which the truth is wisdom, but that mother is wisdom, and sucking her breast would be to partake or have this wisdom, right? Let's go real quick to the book of, nice word here in Second Esdras. Let's go to chapter 13, verse 55. So it says here, thy life hast thou ordered in wisdom, and has called understanding thy mother, right? And wisdom and understanding, they're of the same cloth, right? Because if you have wisdom, you can't have wisdom without understanding, right? You need to understand properly in order to to have and apply wisdom. Okay, so wisdom comes forth through understanding as well. So it's all intertwined. So the sucking the breast of thy mother, which carnally would make the person your actual biological brother, but dealing with your spiritual brother or a fellow believer, the thing that joins us, rather than having been breastfed of the same mother, would be having been spiritually breastfed of the same mother, which is wisdom, i.e., we both believe in the truth, right? In the same truth. When I should find thee without, right, which without meaning in this case without the truth, right? You don't have this knowledge, right? I would kiss thee. And the kiss here is not talking about like an actual kiss, but it's more representing imparting the truth onto you. Yea, I should not be despised, right, for telling you the truth. And let's go to Galatians 4, verse 16. Like the Apostle Paul said, am I therefore become your enemy because I tell you the truth? The answer should be no, right? I shouldn't become your enemy for telling you the truth. I shouldn't be despised, right, for doing so. So dealing with verse 1, right, you have the once again, there you go with the allegory, right? You have the literal, the contextual meaning, what's going on, but then you also have the hidden meaning of what this means. So verse 2, similarly, right, let's deal first with the meaning and context, right? So you're dealing with the woman. She's in this love story, and she's singing here about or speaking about her lover. Verse 2, I would lead thee and bring thee into my mother's house, who would instruct me, right? My mother who instructed me or raised me. I would bring you into my mother's house. I will cause thee to drink of spiced wine of the juice of my pomegranate, right? So in other words, in terms of contextually speaking, right, she would bring her lover home with her, right, offer him a drink, take care of him. Now, the allegory of this, or the allegorical meaning of this here, would be the leading, right? Leading you would be to teach you, okay, to impart this wisdom to you, and that's bringing you into my mother's house. Because if we in verse 1 identified the mother to be wisdom, which is this truth, then bringing you into my mother's house would be like introducing you to wisdom, right, who instructs us, and that would be by teaching you this truth, giving you this knowledge. Likewise, right, I will cause thee to drink of spiced wine, which the truth is also likened unto wine, of the juice of my pomegranate. And so how would we cause you to drink that? By teaching you. So you're not literally, drinking, but it's just a metaphor for you being taught or receiving the correct understanding, right, of the scriptures, the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, which you can just sum up as wisdom. Verse 3, his hand should be under my head, and his right hand should embrace me. Now, in context, right, this is like her being, like an intimate embracing, right, of her lover, like a man would, you have your woman, you hold them, right, a certain way and pull them in close. Now, spiritually speaking, right, and along in the lines of what we just went through in chapter 1, verse 1 and verse 2, this would be us being drawn closer, right? Basically, through the knowledge, the Lord would draw you closer and near to him, right? Like we just went through in verse 1, right? If I saw you without, I would, kiss you. I would, give you this word. And then what would happen? The Lord would draw you near unto him. All right. Verse 4, I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, that ye stir not up, nor awake my love until he please. And just as has been mentioned in previous chapters in Song of Songs, the stirring up, okay, nor awake my love till he please, is, not to if the love here is the Most High, then trying to stir him up is like trying to force his hand, right? Trying to cause him to take action, before he so desires. And number one, that's futile and it's inevitable, right? But here, as it's being written, that's not our job, right? The Most High has already set everything to happen in its appointed time when he pleases. Okay, so you trying to take carnal actions to try and set certain things in motion or provoke the Lord to take certain action, it's not going to happen that way. All right. Verse 5, who is this that cometh up from the wilderness, leaning upon her beloved? So going back to the story, right, of this woman. Now, keep in mind, as we've been going through these chapters, you notice that even though Solomon doesn't make it abundantly explicit, because in when you're reading like a play, when you're reading a play, it's very clear, right, who's saying what, right? It was okay, this portion, it'll say okay, and then it'll put the name of the person speaking, and then it'll write what they're supposed to say. Then the next person who's going to speak what they're supposed to say. It's not like that in music. Okay, like sometimes when you listen to music, one song that just came to mind is when you listen to, and I'll say it in a second, when you listen to music that you have multiple artists in, right? Maybe it's featuring somebody like Eminem and Rihanna. Love the Way You Lie. I think that's the name of the song, right? When they're switching parts, Rihanna doesn't when she's singing, she doesn't necessarily say every time before she's about to start singing, this is Rihanna, or after she says her verses, she'll say by Rihanna or said Rihanna. No, it's just like a back and forth. So if you are not listening to the actual music to hear the difference in voices, and you're just reading the lyrics, you might not know that, hey, this is actually one person speaking and the other person responding. right? Or the other person speaking, or the other person responding. Like, you may be able, if you read it very carefully and identify through, context, okay, it seems like the way that this guy, if there's an argument, it seems like the masculine tone, or let's say the one who's in favor of a certain thing, speaks a certain kind of way whenever they start speaking. And the other person responds, maybe they're a bit more defensive. So you can tell by that change in tone, oh, okay, as the song flows, I know who's speaking at this point. But mainly you'd have to be listening to the song to be able to hear, when she says something, and then, he jumps in, and then now he starts rapping, and it's still a message overall. If you listen to the song, there's a concept, like there's something going on in here, some event that's being addressed, and they're singing back and forth about it. So likewise, when you are reading Song of Songs, it's a song. So there are parts in here where it's going to be from the perspective of the woman. Sometimes it's going to be from the perspective of the man, her lover. And then sometimes you're going to have some that are not the man or the woman, but an external audience, right? Like sometimes it'll be like from the perspective of the daughters of Jerusalem, or some external figure in there. So you have to read it very, closely to be able to pick that out. And that's why you'll see, if you read it in some other translations, like the NLT, they'll put, not saying they're always 100% right, but they'll do their best to put whose perspective this verse or the verse after is coming from. Okay, so continuing, Salaki, if that was a mouthful, but where are we at? Right, verse 5. So let's read this here in both translations. It says, "Who is this that cometh up from the wilderness, leaning upon her beloved? I raised thee I raised thee up under the apple tree. There thy mother brought thee brought thee forth. There she brought thee forth that bare thee." All right, let's read this in the NLT. So the young women of Jerusalem say, "Who is this sweeping in from the desert, leaning on her lover? I aroused you," says her, "onto the apple or under the apple tree, where your mother gave you birth, where in great pain she delivered you." Verse 6, set me as a seal upon thine heart. So here she's speaking to her lover here. "Set me as a seal upon thine heart, set as a seal upon thine arm." Basically, like, bind me to you. "For love is strong as death. Jealousy is cruel as the grave. The coals thereof are coals of fire, which hath a most vehement flame." And that is what we call the game of love, right? NLT, "Place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm. For love is as strong as death. Its jealousy as enduring as the grave." Yeah, because jealousy over somebody you really love can be as long lasting, right, as it says, or as enduring as the grave. "Love flashes like fire, the brightest kind of flame." Verse 7, "Many waters cannot quench love." So if love is likened onto a burning sensation or feeling or passion, not even water or abundance of water can quench it. Neither can, hey, you've seen, you look at certain love stories, you'll see sometimes things that you do not expect in the slightest will happen, driven by quote unquote love, right? You'll have two people that have complete opposite backgrounds that'll be joined and somehow, some way, uncontrollably inclined to want to be together because of love. So it says, neither can and that's why also when you go into certain cultures, that's why they keep they separate or segregate, if that's the right word in this context, but they separate boys and girls, okay? Because they know that it can be very very difficult if a girl falls in love with a boy. And what I mean is that typically in certain countries, right, or in certain cultures, they would have the tradition, the daughter would be raised in her father's house. Eventually she would become of age and she would be given to marriage and so on, right? Now, if she goes and falls in love with somebody, that love can be so strong that she might be sneaky, right? And that love might override her obedience to the norm or to how she's raised, and she would end up taking actions that she probably should not do. So they know how powerful it can be. And so they try to guard heavily against that by completely not even, and this chapter is also going to mention that, right? But not even giving any room, any wiggle room to entertain that. So as it says, many waters cannot quench love, neither can the floods drown it. If a man would give all the substance of his house for love, it would utterly be contemned, meaning that it would be looked at as not even worthy. That's to say, like, love is priceless. NLT, many waters cannot quench love, nor can rivers drown it. If a man tried to buy love with all his wealth, his offer would be utterly scorned. Now, going into verse 8. So here you see that this is like from the perspective of not the man, which is the lover, and not the woman. And some translations will have this as like others, some will have it as like the friends, some will have it as like the brothers of the woman. So it says here, we have a little sister, and she hath no breasts, meaning that her breasts are either underdeveloped or just very small. What shall we do for our sister in the day when she shall be spoken for? Spoken for meaning in the day of marriage, when somebody comes to ask for her hand in marriage. Verse 9. Now, likewise, like we went through in verses 1 and 2, and 3, you have here the context, right? The contextual meaning of verses 9 and 10, and then you have the allegorical meaning of verses 9 and 10. So starting with the contextual, here along the storyline where they're saying, what are we going to do for our sister, basically to prepare her for the time of marriage when somebody comes to ask her hand in marriage. Verse 9, well, as it says here, if she be a wall, we will build upon her a palace of silver. And if she be a door, we will enclose her with boards of cedar. Now, when it says if she be a wall, what it means is if she is, in context, what it means is if she is like chaste, all right, or difficult to approach, or she's well kept. Let's go into that word wall. So it says wall, wall of protection, walled. But if we look in the Jacinius Hebrew Chaldee Lexicon, it says here, metaphor used of a maiden, chaste and difficult of approach, right? And this cant, I think that's another name for Song of Songs. Let's see, Song of Songs also. Yeah, canticles. Okay, from a Latin derivation. So, where was the word we're looking for here, right? So, of a maiden that's chaste and difficult to approach, right? So, if she is well kept, right, and she is chaste and she is not, a fast girl, we will build upon her a palace of silver, right? Which here would represent basically supporting her, right? We will support her, as best we can. And if she be a door, which is the opposite here of a wall, which this means to be like a fast girl, as we would say today, right? It says here of an easily accessible woman. So knowing that, if you know that that's how she is, we will enclose her with boards of cedar. Okay, so basically it's like keeping her in straightly, not giving any room or wiggle room, because we know that this is how she is. And this would be to prepare her for the time when somebody would want to come and marry her. The scriptures also tell us, if we go to the book of, I wonder if it'll show up here. Okay, Ecclesiasticus 26, verse 10. It says here, if thy daughter be shameless, right? Which will be an example of a door. Keep her in straitly, lest she abuse herself through overmuch liberty, right? She has too much freedom. Guess what? She's going to abuse herself. She's going to spoil her body because her mind is not disciplined. Okay? Verse 10, as it says here, I am a wall, and my breasts like towers. Then was I in his eyes as one that found favor. So now, before going back into that, let's jump back up to verse 9. So now, dealing with this in the allegorical form, right, when it mentions here, if she be a wall, that wall here is, allegorically like somebody that's flat chested, right? If you look at it for face value, a wall is very flat. So here, it like saying that if she be a wall, if she's flat chested, we will build upon her a palace of silver. And the we here would be, us. And this is more so in the time of post deliverance, right? Once the Lord has already established us, and we have the power and the ability to alter, okay, her body at will, so you can if her features do not satisfy you, you can alter it with power, right? With spiritual power, the same way the Lord is able to alter, your body. Like, Yahushua mentioned that which of you by taking thought can add 1 cubit to his stature. We couldn't do that, but we will be able to do that in the kingdom, right? We'll be able to manipulate our bodies. So likewise, we'll be able to manipulate and alter the bodies of our women if we so please. And in that context, if you have a woman that, is not where you want her to be, she's not voluptuous enough, then as it says, we will build upon her a palace of silver, which the palace of silver here would just be like the increase of size, right? You can alter her body or, increase the size of her breasts or her whatever features you're trying to, do, which Esau is trying to do that now through gene manipulation, but that's not going to work. That's just pseudo. It says here, and if she be a door, right? In that case, if she's similar to a wall and a door, both are flat, we will enclose her with boards of cedar, right? And this enclosing, let's actually look into that word, because one of the definitions there also lines up with this with this point, right? So let's look at that word enclose. As much as it means to, to keep in, right? You can see here to besiege, to confine, to shut in. You also have the word qual, to form or fashion. Okay, so in the kingdom, when we have that power and we have that will, we will be able to form or fashion her, or in this case her body, with boards of cedar, which we're not going to put actual cedar boards in her body, but these will represent, the alterations of her body to our liking. So kind of like just how you're able to build, a building or whatnot using wood and boards of cedar, we having power would be able to alter, her body to what is desirable. So now going to verse 10, it says, I am a wall and my breasts like towers. So now resuming back with the, the story, the love story here, basically finishing it off. She says here, well, concerning me, I'm a wall, right? I'm chaste. I'm well kept. And I have the features, right? My breasts are like towers. And when you go into that word towers, so it's no wonder her lover kept talking about her breasts throughout the song. Comparing them to roes, young roes that are like twins. That's very creative. So it says here, right? Tower elevated, right? Raised bed. So here it's, her breasts are not actual towers, but it's just figurative speech to say that she has sizable breasts. Then was I in his eyes as one that was favored, right? So she was desirable onto him, onto her lover. Solomon had a vineyard at Baal Hamon. He let out the vineyard onto keepers. Even one of the fruit of Slakia, every one for the fruit thereof was to bring 1,000 pieces of silver. Now remember, this is a part of his song. So he's throwing this into the lyrics, because you might say, well, wait, hold on. If Solomon, if the woman, the Shulamite woman, is to represent Solomon, and she's speaking here, why is she referencing Solomon? Well, it's the lyrics that he wrote. Okay, so if he wanted to throw himself in, he has like a cameo, right, or reference in the story here, well, he can do that. So it says Solomon had a vineyard at Baal Hamon. He let out the vineyard onto keepers, right, those that would dress it and take care of it. Every one for the fruit thereof was to bring 1,000 pieces of silver. So typically the way that works is if you own a vineyard and you lease it, then the cost for that, or your recompense that you would get, is that here the price Solomon set would be 1,000 pieces of silver. And they would be able to use that vineyard, plant on it, and then sow, right, and then harvest. And of course, they'll be able to make money off of their harvest, but they would give you, your share. My vineyard, which is mine, is before me, is in my power. Thou, O Solomon, must have 1,000, so to you I'll give your 1,000 pieces, and those that keep the fruit thereof 200. So those that actually tend to the taking care of it, 200. They'll get 200 pieces. And then once again continues back with the love story here, finally wrapping it up. So here being the perspective of her lover, right, which calls out to her and says, thou that dwellest in the gardens, thy companions hearken to thy voice, cause me to hear it. In other words, I want to hear your voice. Right? So here it says the young man, or the beloved, says to her, O my darling, lingering in the gardens, your companions are fortunate to hear your voice. Let me hear it too. And then she responds, come my way, my love, be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountains of spices, meaning, swiftly. Okay. So it says here, make haste, my beloved, and be thou like a roe or to a young hart upon the mountains of spices. So come to me swiftly, or quickly. And that brings us to the end of the book of Song of Songs, the 8th chapter, and the entirety of the book of Song of Songs. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakha Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.